Live on X Spaces and on YouTube. And thanks for joining me here today. Gonna do something fun today. I've been just doing snow work all morning, actually. And my mind, I think a lot when I do monotonous chores. And that's this morning thinking on all these Tesla drivers. And it's a hilarious thing. It's also hilarious for me because I am a Tesla driver. I have a few vehicles, and one of them is a Tesla. And I think there's a thing that people are just missing on this whole thing. They're just missing the big picture on this whole thing. So in today's space and stream, I'm going to riff on this and I'm going to show a bunch of stuff. I'm going to share my screen, show you some videos. And we're going to bring this whole issue big picture. Okay. So let me, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Now, people in the space here on X will also be able to hear the audio of this as I get rolling with it. And yeah, I want to riff on the big picture of this. So if you're not familiar with what's going on um, with the Teslas, here's a little video we'll play.
Here are the other.
Oh, we got a bunch of dead robots out here.
Dead robots. Dead Teslas packed the parking lot at this Tesla supercharging station in Oak Brook, a scene mirrored in other supercharging stations around the Chicago area.
Man, this is crazy. It's a disaster. Seriously.
With temperatures falling into the negative double digits, these charging ports have stopped charging, leaving many Tesla owners stranded here in long lines since Sunday.
Nothing, no juice, it's still on 0%. And this is like
Chicago, folks. Chicago.
Has it been charging?
No, not at all.
It just isn't working.
At all. It's just frozen, and so I'm now getting towed to the Tesla service center because that's my only option.
Adding to their frustration, they say, is that they're getting no help when they call Tesla for assistance.
No response from Tesla.
This guy's good.
Suffering since yesterday afternoon. Oh, we got a bunch
Like,
of
like,
dead robots.
like. There's the funny thing about that is that the expectation that Tesla should do something when the reality of the situation. Okay, maybe before I even want to get into that, the thing. Yeah, where do I want to start with this thing? It's just so stupid. Okay. The big thing here is people are stupid. Okay. One is they didn't read and do their due diligence before they bought those cars because it's not hard to find out that lithium ion and lithium in general as a battery source doesn't do well in cold, as does my system here for our off-grid system. I've got to keep those batteries warm. And that's not a big deal because, keep the space warm. I'm in here in my office in the garage. I keep the space warm. So having the batteries there, also having the Tesla there is good. But it also speaks to the dependency that the average person has on resources outside of their control, resources that they have no agency in. That's the meta thing that I want to speak to at this. And we'll go into that way deeper, but so there's the Tesla thing, and people just are stupid, and they didn't think, oh geez, if I buy a Tesla Model 3 for $50,000, which isn't cheap for a cheap vehicle, it's not cheap at all. It's still expensive, but it's the price point that most Tesla drivers could get into a Tesla at. It was about $50,000. But they don't have any of the things required to really utilize that vehicle at its best capacity. If you buy an electric vehicle and you have to go and plug in somewhere else all the time, not your home, big problem there. But a bigger problem with it is also that you're plugging into the grid. And so with the mass rollout of all these Tesla vehicles, Now there's this massive draw on the grid. Go figure, right? Go figure. But it's so funny because people are just so stupid. The average individual in this video here that I showed you is so stupid. They're just not thinking that, geez, maybe I should keep it warm. Geez, maybe I should plug it in somewhere or have somewhere to plug it in at night when I go home. But nobody does because people do not think things through. Okay. And so that's the kind of that's the micro issue with this is that, buyer beware. It's like you didn't do your homework on the product, right? So that's the first thing. And let me speak to a little bit about the Tesla scene a little bit. I was talking about this on the stream last time, is that in the earlier days of Tesla, so 6 years ago, about 5 years ago, about if you bought a Tesla, you were probably in a small minority of what the total customer base is now, and you were a Model S driver first or a Model X driver. And when I got my Tesla in 2019, I did a bunch of road trips through the US, went through dozens of states, and was charging at the Tesla superchargers. And everybody there was mostly a Model S driver, and then some Model X's, and then the odd Model 3, because they were still fairly early in those days. And if I were to give you two customer demographics of the people that you meet at the Tesla supercharging stations back then, it was white guys age 50 on, kind of semi-successful guys who are very successful, or young Asian entrepreneurs in the Los Angeles area. Otherwise, that was the demographic of Tesla drivers that I met traveling across the United States in 2019. But now it's a lot of folks like the folks you saw in that video. Okay. So the Tesla scene is not what it was. It's very different. It's become mass market. And when things go mass market, they go to the lowest common denominator, right? So they go to a lot of people who just don't think things through. And this is, might I warn you, and this is going to lead into what I want to bring the meta issue of this about, is that when times get tough, there's a lot of people who just don't know what the fuck is going on, right? They just don't know what the hell's going on. And we're going to circle to that at the end of this too. And I'm going to offer some solutions for just even people who are not quite figuring it out. And I've been saying this for many years, and it's always worth iterating, is that if you're not seriously looking at having the basic provisions to survive a period of time without any bought inputs, you're crazy. You need to be doing that all the time. You're thinking about food, water, energy, and shelter, and the things that you need. Communication devices are another super important one, but things that you need when the grocery store is empty. And I'm going to share another video here, and I'm going to bring us back to something in U.S. history that isn't that long ago, and I'm just old enough to not remember this because I was born in 1979. But this is what happened in 1973. There was an oil crisis, and it was caused by an embargo in the Middle East, and it was all based around Israel. But let me just play this little video for you here and give you a little sense of this. And we're going to bring this right back to Tesla.
Supply issues and international conflict.
World wars among big powers are quite possible to control dwindling oil supplies.
Just like it did in 1973, when an OPEC oil embargo led to an international shortage and rocked the global economy.
In the Dallas area today, dealers raised prices to more than 40 cents a gallon.
Yes, kids, that was a lot, but a federal government price cap kept the prices down, yet created a whole new set of problems, like rationing and an industry shutting down, unable to turn a profit.
But you will go up when you get the word.
Yes, sir, I definitely will.
Another idea to save gas, just drive slower.
And many Dallas motorists agree that it's going to take a decrease.
Right. So, you get it. There's some more videos on this. I found this one very interesting. The Economist, which, if you're familiar with The Economist, very mainstream rag, but it's basically a propaganda mouthpiece for the Rothschild dynasty and just big finance. It's just, it's liberal, but it's and I used to read The Economist when I was a liberal. And it's a good rag as far as, you know, just getting a broad picture of what's going on, but it is a total predictive programming, so on and so forth. Look at this. The Economist covered this a year ago, and even this one here, History of Maps, this one came out 7 months ago, but they're gaslighting you.
Europe didn't follow suit. In 2021,
It was a good, here's a little bit of a geopolitical part on it.
Badly dependent
Where
on a
is
hostile
this?
state.
The energy shock that we're living through now really began with natural gas. In the run-up to and during the Ukraine war, Russia squeezed Europe very badly, cutting off most of
Listen to what this guy says right here. This is a year ago, The Economist.
being overly reliant on a single supplier, the way that Germany relied on Russia for 55% of its natural gas a couple of years ago. That is a sure ticket to lack of security. So diversify your suppliers.
Diversify your suppliers. So the United States and Canada, both under the absolute control of the New World Order, the Anglo-American Zionist establishment, have for years now, especially since Biden came into the US, dismantling the diversification of their energy, right? They're dismantling it. Yeah, is that controversial to say? Like, is that a controversial thing to say at all? No, I don't think it is. We can all see it. Look at the prices, right? So here's The Economist a year ago, and that was during Biden, right? A year ago, The Economist is saying diversify your supply. The Economist is the same rag that says Donald Trump is the greatest threat to American the Western. I forget what the quote was, but not too long ago, The Economist had a big article on that. On if Trump comes back in now it's over. Now it's just the same BS that we've been hearing for years. And I'm no fan of Trump, and I don't even give a shit about party politics, but I do give a shit about the meta narrative. And that is the thing that's crazy about this, is the meta narrative. And the meta narrative is that human beings in general, particularly in the West, are far too dependent on resources that they have no agency over. So it's fun to make fun of all these people that bought a Tesla and are stranded because they didn't think that batteries needed to stay warm. Like, it's just so ridiculous. That's funny. But look at the videos in 1973 of people standing in the parking lots. What's the difference? The difference, the thing that they have in common is that if you're a Tesla driver, if you're a Tesla driver who only has agency over the energy in that car when you go and plug in at a charging station, no different than when you go to plug in at a gas station, right? It's the exact same thing if you drive a gas vehicle. So it's fun for all the conservatives to make fun of liberal idiot Tesla drivers, me not being one of them, but people who are too stupid to think these things through and now can't drive their vehicle. It is funny, right? It's a funny meme. But at the same time, you will be just as hoodwinked because the New World Order wants to shut down petroleum and the gas and all gas drilling, right? And so just the irony of this guy in the Economist video saying, let's diversify our supply a year ago in a rag that has been so anti diversifying their supply, at least by bringing it home. The irony of it is complete gaslighting, but it also speaks to this bigger issue that it doesn't matter if you're a Tesla driver or a gasoline car driver. You have the average individual driving either of those things has little to no agency over the resource that they depend on to drive it, right? So you can see that there's a huge correlation here. The real meta thing that's funny is not, it's funny in a tragic comedy type way. The meta issue is not that Tesla drivers didn't think things through. The meta issue is that they had no agency on that resource, energy. just as the same as people in 1973, all over the United States had no agency over that resource that they needed, right? You can actually make the case, and I'll make it here, that electricity, this is why electric vehicles are superior if you have the context that suits them, is that my homestead is primarily solar. Like 99% of the kilowatt hours that my homestead generates come from solar. For the other 1%, it's diesel and a generator. And I don't use that diesel to charge my Tesla. I just drive my gas truck. But I have agency over at least 99% of my electricity. So a Tesla or an electric vehicle or an electric tool in general, albeit they're the same thing, they're just tools, right? One has an energy source of this and another has an energy source of that. At least with that, for people who are off grid, I have agency over it. So people are probably laughing because I put that thumbnail up of my Tesla. My wife and I took that this morning before doing this, and I can see people, how's it driving, right? Because it's funny. The whole story is funny. It's like, well, I don't know. It actually hasn't affected me whatsoever because I keep my car in a warm garage, which is what every Tesla driver should do. That's why electric vehicles make no sense for the average proletariat, right? Like all these people buying these cheap Model 3s, used Model 3s, or getting them as cheap as they can by just making them two-wheel drive or whatever, but they're just garbage cars, really. They're not like the better electric vehicles. They just can't, they have no agency. They can't drive them. So it's just absolutely insane. And this is where I want to kind of come back to this whole idea of agency, and that if you don't have agency over things, then it will be taken from you. And this is where it's funny because all the conservative people on the conservative side like to make fun of Tesla and all that. But it's like, dude, the New World Order is trying harder to throttle petroleum than it is solar power. So to me, a lot of all this EVs, etc., all these things are just a hedge against what you can see the New World Order doing clearly, right? If you're not diversifying your energy sources and your tools that use those energy sources, you're going to paint yourself into a corner potentially. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just that most people who drive Teslas, that's not why they're driving them. They're not driving them to think, oh, I can have agency over my electricity because I'm solar. And I've been solar as long as I've had a Tesla, because even my house in Kelowna had a 11.5 kilowatt solar system. It was grid tied, but it still gave me the lion's share of electricity that I needed for that car. So I wasn't a net draw on the grid. And that's where Tesla will be a nightmare very soon. And what we're seeing here with what happened in Chicago is just the beginning, because Teslas are everywhere. And in cold climates, they suck if you don't have a warm place to park them. And so this is going to hurt Tesla for sure. It's going to hurt them because this realization, people are just going to, they're going to flood the market with used Model 3s and Model Ys. Because if you do not have a place for that vehicle to stay warm, especially overnight, especially while it's charging, don't buy one. It's not going to save you anything in fuel. It's just not, especially because of the upfront cost. And that's the thing that most these Tesla drivers don't think about, is they think, oh, I'm going to be driving for free or next to nothing. Because it is true, the same amount of kilowatt hours that'll give you about a kilometer or a sixth of a mile of range, call it 6 miles or 10 kilometers of range, is about a fifth the cost of that same distance in gas in general. Now, of course, the devil's in the details. It depends on what place you are, because electricity is really expensive in some places like California and not in British Columbia, and same gasoline, so there's a lot of variables on how you would equate that. But that's what I found, because I've driven an electric vehicle and a gas powered vehicle gas my entire life. But my Tesla I've had it released like almost 6 years. So I've driven it for a while and really understand the nuance of it. So that's, but that's the thing. Again, it all comes down to agency over the things that you have. And that's where I want to just talk a little bit more about what are some solutions for that? Because there are some really low hanging fruit solutions that people can use to say get through a crisis. A crisis of varying degrees, but let's pick 7 days. Let's say you had nothing coming in for 7 days, period. Can't go to the store. Maybe you can't even leave your house. There's no water. There's no food. There's nothing. You just have to imagine a scenario where you're locked down and it's too dangerous to go outside, or you just can't get anything because it's complete chaos. Okay, imagine that scenario. As we move forward into 2024, I think that scenario is becoming less and less hard to imagine, especially when you think about what I'm talking about here, because 1973 could happen again. 1973 was based around an issue with Israel, and then Egypt, Iraq, and Iran, and Pakistan, and a bunch of other. I think those are the main countries caused the embargo, right? Do you think there's a greater chance of an embargo now or then? Now, with more of what has been done to dismantle the North American energy sector. So do you think it's more likely now or in 73? I would say now by a huge order of geopolitical what the hell's the word I'm trying to look for? Just a huge amount of I forget the word I was trying to imagine, but that's what it would just. There's more likelihood now that that's going to happen geopolitically than it would have then, because look at the geopolitical factors going on now. Okay, so that's the issue there. So going back to 7 days, okay, the things that I talk about are in so far as things that are rations of things you need: food, water, energy, shelter. Okay. Communication devices are important, but you can have that thing and then that's all you need, right? You can have a ham radio or some basic infrastructure for that. So I won't get into those things, but those things are equally important. Because this could happen again tomorrow. Everybody, whether you're living on the land and off grid like me or not, should have these things I'm going to talk through. And these are just the basics. You can go way deeper, but I just mostly want to convey a principle here and some solutions that you can execute on, so that this could help people. You can go and buy these things tomorrow. Go and buy these things if you can before everybody else goes to buy them, because then you won't be getting them. Okay. So to start, 7 days of store food. That's not a very hard thing to get. You can buy out of the box things. I don't have any affiliations with these companies, but InfoWars has them, Heaven's Harvest and stuff like that. My Patriot Supply, things like that. You can just get that. And so the quality of that food isn't all that great. However, it will sustain you. And you can basically have like a 7-day meal plan. Boom, it's in a box or in a bag or something like that. You can solve that with almost one click. You can get that thing sorted. Okay. So that's easy to do. 7 days. 7 days of stored water. So basically just enough water to drink for your whole family. And you just have to figure this out. How much water do you drink in a day? Maybe it's what can you survive on? 3 liters of water a day, maybe a liter. I don't know. Multiply that by the people in your family and by 7 days, and then store that much water, whether it's in bottles. I like glass. You can get those big glass containers now to store water in. Those are great. And then just one of those pumps that goes on top. You can get something like that. You also want to have something mobile, right? You want to have some of that water that's mobile. So a bunch of just bottles that and a lot of us just have those types of, I drink out of a glass most of the time like this. I love this little bottle, but those steel canisters and canteens are great too. But you want to have 7 days of water that you can drink and, maybe wash a bit of dishes with. Obviously you're not going to have enough to shower with, but enough so that you could clean a wound. I don't know, water your most important plants maybe, but that'd be getting a little bit ridiculous. But yes, have that much water stored. Not that hard of a thing to do, not that expensive to do. The next thing is have some kind of energy source that you can just light up, like a small generator. You can get, there's all kinds of brands out there. I really like those small Honda ones that have the handle on it. They're really small. They might just be 2 kilowatts or something, but they're really easy to move around. You could throw them in the back of your car and go. Those are really cool. And just get enough premium boat gas for 7 days. So that could be, I don't know, it could be 2 big, what are they, the 30-liter canteens or something like that. 2 big canteens, and then a power bar, an extension cord, kind of keep that all in one place so that you have it when you need it. And you can just, okay, power's down, put the generator outside the door, run the extension cord in, you got your power bar on there, what have you. Okay. So that's your energy. And then 2 other things that are in regards to shelter. So I really talk about food, water, energy, and shelter. Okay, we talk about food, water, energy. Shelter in this case is not going to be your house, right? Well, it would be if you're out in the bush, you need a tent, you need some shelter, but this assumes you have some shelter. And so you need some things within that shelter so that you can hunker down for 7 days. 2 things. One is an alternative heat source. So it could be, they make small, they're almost the size of those mini Honda generators or smaller propane heaters that you can run inside to keep a place warm. You should vent the window a little bit so that you don't get too much gas building up in there, but you can use those as a source to just have heat immediately when you need it. Okay. So that's the first one, a source of heat. Of course, if you got a wood stove in your house, that's always good too. Maybe you don't use it all the time, but make sure that it's usable if you would need it, because wood is the best. And then the other thing is you need to have a place to poop and pee. For guys and some girls, it's easy to pee outside, especially in the summer or the warmer months. But and in the winter, it's easy for guys. But you want to have a place to do that. And so the easiest DIY cheap solution that you can do for that is a 5-gallon bucket system. And this is actually currently what we poop and pee in on our homestead. When our house is finished, we'll have a septic and that'll function just as it would anywhere that has a septic. But for now, we just do a really simple humanure setup. Now, the original idea I learned about this was from a guy named Joseph Jenkins, a book called The Humanure Handbook. It's a pretty funny book, but it basically shows you how to compost your poop and your pee. And all you need to do is have 5-gallon buckets, have some stored sawdust from a mill. If you want to be able to use the compost in your garden, you don't want to have cedar because cedar is acidic, but it could be pine or fir or any kind of wood that is cut from a sawmill. And you can get this stuff for pretty much free, and it's easy to stockpile. So if I wanted to have, say, a really lean, simple setup for, say, a family of 4 to poop and pee locked down for 7 days, I would have about 6 5-gallon buckets. One of them, maybe 2 of them would be filled with sawdust, lids on it. And then the other 4 would be empty with lids available for you to poop and pee in. And basically you poop, pee in there and you put sawdust on it. You keep covering it with sawdust as you go. Toilet paper, everything goes in there. You can compost all of that. But you could, if you were locked down, you could essentially just, because if it's winter, say, and it's cold, you could just put that right next to your toilet, make a little rig around it, like just a box around it so you can put a toilet seat on it. That's essentially what our toilet is right now. And you can it's a comfortable toilet. Sure, it's not as convenient and as clean and simple as a flush toilet, but it works and it will allow you to basically hunker down. So those are my things. Those are my super 7-day alternatives for food, water, energy, and shelter. Because I'm telling you guys, the gaslighting with all this stuff is just getting more and more insane. And I think on the meta, that Tesla story is totally just gaslighting everybody to not just make fun of Tesla drivers. Yeah, that's fun. That's for, the right is winning right now in the culture war a bit. And so that's funny for us, right? But it's also making fun of you, because it's also showing you how easily throttled you could be with the slightest disruption in the basic necessities that are provided to us every single day, just walking out of the house. So that's mostly what I wanted to say in this video. We got some people in the space. If people want to chime in on the space, hit the request and I'll bring you in. I'll maybe answer some super chats here in the meantime on the live stream, and then we'll just shut this puppy down. But you know what I mean, folks? It's like, think about these things, because so many people are just not thinking about the basic necessities of what you need. So I got a super chat here from Rohan. I heard Tesla is piloting auto part order if found not working. Scary. I don't quite understand what you mean. I will tell you that is a major problem with Tesla. It's a major problem, but it's also good in some ways that I've seen it. So Tesla's whole repair industry is owned by Tesla. You can't be a third-party guy and fix Teslas. You can, but you're kind of just going rogue. Like there's that guy, Rich Rebuilds. He makes pretty cool YouTube videos of just rebuilding Teslas and doing all of his maintenance himself. And he's pretty much open sourced. Or he just showed people how you can repair these things. And it's cool. So it's possible, right? You could hack them. You could take out the computers if you wanted to. Actually, dude, that reminds me. That was another thing I wanted to show you guys. Riffing on Teslas a bit more. So, the big thing that a lot of people, kind of critique me for owning a EV truck, just a second, a Tesla, is all the computer stuff and all of the the centralization with the autopilot and all that stuff. And that's all valid and good critique. I agree with that. And there's not much to say about it, except that it's the same for most new vehicles in general. So electric vehicles or Teslas aren't really mutually exclusive to that capacity. But the idea of electric vehicles still, though, could be really punk rock. Okay. Like it could be really decentralized. I want to show you something pretty sweet here. This was an electric vehicle truck that was discontinued tragically. It was discontinued, but it was the most badass, hardcore, off-grid truck because it was totally there. Let me just see if I can search ahead in it. That's what it is here in the video. I'm just want to find the part where they show the inside. This truck has no electronics. Okay. It's all analog. Check this out.
So the mechanism is nicely made. You're probably wondering, where the heck's the sat nav and the infotainment system? Well, there isn't one. Bollinger doesn't want to have any obsolescence in the vehicle because in 5 years' time, some old sat nav would just look out of date, wouldn't it? You're going to use your mobile phone to get around anyway, so they don't have it in the car. So in 10, 20 years' time, it's still fine to use. In fact, it looks like a classic car here on the inside. If you look at the simple dials, the old-fashioned gear selector there, and these knurled switches for things like the four-wheel drive system and the air conditioning. Yes, it does have air conditioning, thank God, and heated seats. I like how they've done the air vents, actually. Don't you just rotate them either at the windscreen or towards you, depending on whether you need cooling or the windscreen needs deeper.
So isn't that cool? That's what I'm into. That's what Tesla should be making. That would be the most punk rock, and it was, so it got discontinued. I'm pretty sure what happened with it, but don't quote me on this. Look into it yourself, and if I'm wrong, let me know. But I'm pretty sure Amazon bought their basically they just bought them, like major aggressive takeover, and then they just scrapped everything as far as everything above the chassis on the vehicle, scrapped all of it. And all they took is the electric components, the motor, and everything, basically just the chassis. And then they're building their Amazon delivery trucks on top of them. That's what I heard happened. And so, but that vehicle there, that would be the ultimate sort of steampunk or sort of Mad Max world truck, the ultimate, because sure, petroleum is amazing, and there is no real better source than petroleum right now as far as energy density. There just isn't, like, at least one that's readily available and easy and accessible, right? And especially decentralized. There just isn't. But solar power is decentralized and widely available. If the sun shines every day for you, you can get electricity. Like it's crazy snowing out right now. My panels are now covered, but I still harvested probably a kilowatt of power today, just in the first half of the day before it started snowing. So that's passive. That just comes in, right? And if you have a big system and batteries, then you can just carry a load. I'm running for days. I don't even need to turn on my generator. I can run for days with my battery storage, just minimize my energy consumption. I can just run. And so to think, well, then now I could take that energy and put it into something like that, boom. It's far better than petroleum, really. In that it's a hedge, because petroleum's great if you can get it. And most people have no agency whatsoever over getting petroleum. Yeah, sure, you can make biodiesel and you can do all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, there's all kinds of solutions out there, but those aren't those are far from readily available and turnkey. The average individual or even the average prepper doesn't do those things, right? Doesn't make biodiesel. How many preppers or off-gridders do you know who do things like biodiesel, wood gasification, right? These are all sweet things when it comes to off-grid. But who do you know who does those things or generates steam? You know, steam engines are amazing. That's one thing I'd like to do more of. You know, or thermal energy generators, TEGs, you know, these things are all sweet, but they're just not readily available. They're not turnkey. And that's the challenge. And that's why I say to everybody, if you're going to go off grid, you're most likely going to be solar. If you got micro hydro, sweet, right? But you're most likely going to be solar. And then you just got to get a fuel-based generator, you know, propane, diesel, gas, whatever is preferable. They all have their advantages and disadvantages, right? Like gas has a huge advantage over diesel, because gas engines just light up really easily. Gas is also sweet in that you can get into wood gasification, and then you can run that gas that's burned off the wood through your generator. Literally, that's very possible. And there's even kits out there. Some people are selling some products that are looking quite compelling, that can do that. But you know, diesel is great because it stores a long time, and the engines are really built strong. Like my diesel generator could run for just 6 months straight. Just run it. I've got a tidy tank connected to it. I can just keep topping that tidy tank up if it need be. The tidy tank itself holds 600 liters. So it's like a year's worth of fuel, but I can literally run that thing forever. Propane is also sweet for generators. And you can make a really good case for it too, especially if you use propane for something else like heating. Then propane's quite compelling because it's the best stored fuel for sure. And it has dual purpose. But the problem with it is that you can't make it, and it's less available than gasoline or diesel. At least in that, well, no, it's probably just as available, really. You think about gas. I mean, not every gas station has propane, so it would be less available, but it's still fairly available. But so all those sources are sweet. Another really compelling one is hydrogen, where off-grid systems during the summer months are dedicating so it's a dump load, all excess kilowatt hours into electrolysis. And apparently it converts at about a 50-50 ratio. So you dump in 100 kilowatt hours of electricity into electrolysis, and you get 50 kilowatt hours of stored hydrogen gas. The challenge with hydrogen gas is it's the number one element, right? On the periodic table, it's number one, hydrogen. It's the smallest particle. And I believe it is the smallest particle. And it's hard to contain. But so anyways, there's all these off-grid systems now where you can dump load into electrolysis, hold enough hydrogen to store for 6 months, and then use that as a burned fuel for heat and electricity generation through internal combustion, which is the sweetest. Those hydrogen fuel cells are a total joke. It's a total scam on over complicated technology meant to be be redundant, basically meant, and that's what a lot of this stuff is with green energy. Like wind is the same thing. It's it's a total joke. It's just a boondoggle because there's so much money pumping in from the big banks into it. There's just all these startups, turn and burn, fly by night, that just build these stupid ideas that get propped up by the establishment because they're stupid ideas, like the hydrogen fuel cell. It's a stupid thing compared to just burning uh, hydrogen, just internal combustion. We might be able to, I mean, a big solution for like post shit hitting the fan scenario for people might be if more DIYers and off-gridders get into doing electrolysis and finding better ways to store hydrogen gas. We might be able to convert all the gas powered vehicles to them because it can work in the same internal combustion way. The devil's in the details, of course, and I'm not an engineer, so don't take what I'm saying on this stuff too seriously as far as that technically. I think my broad picture on these power systems is pretty astute, but don't, get locked in the details of that thing. But it is possible. And I do know of people and have heard of people who can convert gas engines into hydrogen running fuel. So, I mean, the big problem with that for Canadians or people in anything below a zone 7 or less, really, you have to worry about freezing. Maybe call it zone 6 and less. We got to worry about freezing. And so that makes containment potentially more challenging if it's water, but if it's stored hydrogen, then maybe not. Then you need to have these super high pressurized tanks that can basically hold the fuel and yes, so you can use it later. So yeah, so that's mostly what I wanted to rant on in this video, folks. Hey, there's 416 people in the stream. We've got, and I just did this totally impromptu today. Who was in this? We got 18 people in the space and seeing a lot of familiar faces. I did say that I was going to stop doing spaces and streams together, which will be the case for my regular Wednesday stream, at least for now. But I just felt like doing it today, just throwing it up on Twitter because it was sort of a viral thing. And so it's kind of funny. I was on with Harrison Smith briefly. I called into the InfoWars show and was talking to Harrison about this kind of stuff, thinking about food, water, energy, shelter. People aren't thinking about this stuff enough. They're too caught up in the bullshit politics of the day. And it's cool that InfoWars is back on X, formerly known as Twitter. It's cool that they're now on there. They're still banned though. You can't share InfoWars links on Twitter, which is stupid. Because I have a channel up on band.video now. It's called Off Grid with Curtis Stone. Basically the same as my YouTube channel. If you want, I've only got one video up there so far, but I'll be just eventually just doing everything I post here and posting it there. Though the problem with band is you can't really post to band every day because the front page will just be all of the regular shows. So you kind of have to post on the weekend. At least that's what I've learned. And so that's what I kind of plan to do. But I do plan on posting there more. But I was on with Harrison, and I want to mention one more thing in this stream, and then I'm going to shut this down. But so I was talking to him about off grid, and the other thing I really did want to talk, I've been wanting to go on InfoWars and talk about this for a long time, and maybe they'll see this, and maybe I'll put part of this up on band or something. But and Greg Reese of InfoWars actually did a really good video on this. If you haven't seen it, I wonder if I can multitask enough to find it on here. I won't bother because it's too hard to do. If somebody in the space wants to share it though and find it, that'd be sweet. Or somebody in the YouTube live stream, go on to band video and pull up the last Greg Reese, not the last, is a number of his videos ago about the 1871 Organic Act, about the basically the formation of the corporation of the United States. And if somebody wants to pull that up and put it in the chat or the space, that would be sweet so that people could check it out, and I'll share it if somebody shares it with me in the chat here in YouTube. But it was funny because I've always wanted to go on InfoWars and talk about that because it's the thing in my opinion. I don't want to be monolithic with it and say it is the thing, is the only thing, but it is almost the most important, at least political issue that there possibly is, but it goes above and beyond politics. And so what I'm referring to is in 1871, the United States of America created a corporation called the United States, all caps, in a geographical region known as Washington, D.C. So what happened in 1871 is that what everybody thought they were operating under the United States of America Constitution, 1776, Articles of Confederation, all this stuff, when everybody thought that they were, actually, and I don't know if the Articles of Confederation were prior or after that. I'm not the biggest American history buff, but I do know the 1871 Act. And that's what the point I want to make, is that when this happened, all the people who lived in America had been converted unbeknownst to themselves to legal persons registered in Washington, D.C., whereas prior to that, they weren't. And so this was a hoodwink. This was perhaps the greatest theft of America and America's wealth ever in history. This happened before the Federal Reserve, but this was actually a greater theft than the Federal Reserve. And so anyways, on InfoWars, a guy called in after me and brought this up, and Harrison Smith kind of dismissed it. He's like, yeah, I'm not really a fan of that thing. And it's kind of like, dude, what do you mean you're not a fan of it? Like, we're not talking anime here. We're not talking about a subgenre of jazz. We're talking about the truth. So like, you're not a fan of the truth? Is that what you're saying, Harrison? So I would love to challenge him in a totally amicable and good way, with best intentions, to him on that, because I really think that if people at InfoWars, particularly Alex, Harrison, and Owen, bring light to the issue. Greg Reese made a video on it not too long ago. Bring light to that issue and have somebody come on the show. Doesn't have to be me, because there's way better people to really delve into that document better than me. But you guys need to understand this issue, because if you don't understand this issue, everything in politics is bullshit. Nothing in, whether it's the issue of the days, immigration, war in Ukraine, new proxy war in Israel, the woke propaganda in the schools. Forget all of that. None of that will politically ever change until 1871 is addressed. Because the creation of a corporation where all of you have been appointed as trustees and employees of, and are subservient to this jurisdictional authority that you give a tacit agreement to, until you change that and get away from that, nothing will ever change for the average individual. So there's kind of two ways of looking at this. There's the prepper way and maybe the info warrior way, because a lot of people at InfoWars and a lot of the followers at InfoWars, if I could say this, like, I don't mean to offend anybody, but a lot of people in that community of people are really focused on the political issues of the day. And of the day, they seem to be on our side a bit more, because now it's like, the immigration stuff is being addressed. A lot of this stuff is coming out, even going back to the WikiLeaks in 2016 with the Hillary Clinton Podesta emails and all that stuff. Like, stuff's coming out. It's great, but too many warriors are concerned, and truthers in general are concerned with all these issues of the day roped into politics. So it's nothing wrong with being concerned about those issues, because they're big issues and they're important, right? And the memes are funny. And you got to find some kind of humor out of this. Like, otherwise it's so depressing to just watch this onslaught of propaganda, not propaganda, but just like gaslighting and information that's meant to demoralize you. And that's what it does. It demoralizes you. But until anybody in politics, and this is the crux of the point I'm trying to make here, and the message I want to leave with people who are, maybe the guys at InfoWars will hear this, is that until the issue of 1871 gets addressed, nothing you do politically makes any difference. And here's why. Because there's a corporation that's a business controlling the affairs of that corporation and business, which has you linked into it through your birth certificate, driver's license, all those kinds of things. They own you, and they own your labor through income tax. They own they use you as leverage to inflate the currency. That's how central banks borrow money, is by leveraging the assets in their asset pool, which is all the persons and a bunch of other things, resources and such. But the persons who make up the treasury, basically, all this stuff goes back to the treasury. You're just a bond or a security. But that asset is leveraged to borrow, to say, hey, we want to borrow another $1 trillion and all these poor suckers will work. And we got all these immigrants coming in now that'll work for real cheap. They'll work for a long time to pay off this debt. And so they go, okay, here's the money. And that's how it works. And the Federal Reserve made that worse because prior to the Federal Reserve, the US could at least just create money. And yes, it was inflationary, but it could be distributed without the crazy interest that there is, because it would just be inflationary. So the government could print money, and Canada did the same thing prior to 1971. The government could print money, and I'm not advocating for one system or the other. I'm just saying this is how it was. The government would print money and spend it into existence, right? That's what they would do. They'd print money and then spend it on infrastructure. And then by spending, all that money is going to resource companies, construction companies, people with a job. They're actually putting that money into the economy in a more organic way than the way they do it now, is to create a budget for, say, a road building infrastructure. And then they say, we got a 10 million budget for this project. And you see those on highway signs all around the world. What the government actually does is now and goes and borrows that 10 million from the central bank or central authority in the central bank, and then lends it back to the government at interest, and that interest is paid off by income taxes. And so that whole transaction never needed to happen at all. But because it does, the creation of money by an elite group of people is the fundamental issue. And that stems from 1871, because they needed a corporation to do it in the first place. And so maybe that isn't the thing that, it's kind of the creature between the creature of Jekyll Island in 1913 and 1871, where in this transition in that time to this new form of governance, which was corporate governance and not constitutional governments, we call it de facto and de jure. So de jure governance is the real governance of the people for the people, created almost like a trust that has the citizenry as the beneficiaries. That's what a de jure government is and should be, right? A de facto government is just a corporation doing business and tricking everybody who is a person in that geographical area into a tacit agreement to become an employee or a trustee or essentially a wage slave of that system. And so all the politics of the day, all the issues of the day only matter as Band-Aid fixes right now. They only matter as things that you can do now to stop that one thing. But it's like holes in a dam. Okay, woke one hole. Okay, put a finger on it. Oh, now the migration, put a hand on it, right? Like, you see where I'm going is the more issues you stack on, you get to the point where you will not be able to hold the dam back. And that's the point. And that comes to Cloward and Piven. That comes down to exactly what the New World Order is doing, is by throttling all these issues, but getting you to waste your time on these issues, you're not gonna be able to hold the dam. And so this is where it comes back to my big thesis, or the crux of what I'm trying to say with all this, is that we can either change the system completely, which has to go back to 1871 and all that has to be ratified. The likelihood of that happening is like next to nothing. But in my opinion, any other political issue that doesn't address the printing money and the authority to do so, and the commodification of citizenry through corporate governance, until that is changed, nothing is going to change for the long term in politics. So in my opinion, forget it all. Focus on yourself. Focus on the things that you're going to need to get through the inevitable, which is the writing is on the wall. And this Tesla thing is just another gaslighting thing, telling you and laughing at you that you're too dependent on resources and externalities outside of your control, things that you do not have agency over. That's what it's about. Forget the Tesla. That's the micro issue. Pull the lens back and look at the macro issue. People are too dependent, period. The New World Order wants to eliminate the petroleum industry, wants to destroy agriculture, is destroying every single industry that there is actively. Transportation, just commercial transportation on rail or trucks, that has been sabotaged nonstop for how long now? Attacks on fertilizer plants, and I'm not for industrial agriculture, but at the end of the day, it's still feeding a bunch of people. It's needed, right? It's easy to make that case. They're attacking these sectors. So yeah, you're laughing at the Tesla video because it's retarded and it's ironic and funny, but there's three fingers pointing back at you. That if you think that's funny and you are not prepared, then the joke's going to be on you pretty soon. It's going to be on you. So think about that. And I provided some solutions in this video. We went through the 7 days of things that you should have. Everybody should have those things. And that's just the basis, right? Because the thesis that I've been kind of working on, where I'm trying to expand my information that's out there, is looking at the principles of being off grid, not just looking at the details, right? Like looking at, oh, what kind of system is that? Oh, it's a Schneider Electric. What type of inverter? I mean, that stuff's important too. But trying to bring things down to a base level principle that people can understand, so that when they understand that foundational information, they can figure out the details. Because I think too many things in life are served up to us. They're just served up to you. And people have become really intellectually lazy, where if it isn't just a link that's provided to them, they can't get there. And that's not a good scenario for you in an off-grid or in a grid down scenario. Like that's, if you're that way, then God help you. But what I've been trying to get people to think about is thinking about, it's not just people in the off-grid comments on YouTube. It's the funniest. It's like, oh, you're off-grid, but you're on the internet. Oh, you're off-grid, but you have a Tesla. Oh, like that kind of thing, that kind of mentality of it's either 0 or 1. You either are or you aren't, and there's nothing in between. That's just a limiting way to think about something. That's just a self-imposed limiting belief on yourself, because then what you do is, if it becomes that dichotomy, a false dichotomy for you, then you're either there or you're not, and then you can make up an excuse why you're not. Oh, because it's too hard. Oh, well, Curtis has done it, but look at what Curtis has. Curtis has all this money. He can just do that. You just make up excuses for yourself. But see, what I want to do is dismantle the potential for people to understand that in that false dichotomy by instead of being 0 to 1, where it's like you either are or you aren't, it's 1 to 5, say it, and every scale in between. But just to expand it, it's to think about the state that everybody starts off in by default, and that's dependent. We're all born from our mother's womb dependent, right? We're just dependent. We need people around to survive. We need community. We need the economy as we get older, and so on and so forth. And most people get into their adulthood and are completely dependent on every sector of society that provides a resource that they need, right? And so again, the 4 I talk about the most, and I think are the most important, are food, water, energy, and shelter. So you're dependent. If you come home, flip on the lights, they work. You don't have any agency on it if they don't. You flush the toilet, it works. You go to the fridge, there's food there. There isn't food, you go to the grocery store around the corner and you get it, right? All these things, you just show up and these things work for you. That's dependent. So you can be one step less dependent if you just go to what I said with those 7 things, with those 4 things, with 7 days of it. So 7 days of food, water, energy, and shelter. And by shelter, I mean a place to poop and pee for 7 days and some heat for you. But those things that I went over earlier in this video, that would be a state to be less dependent. Then you can move to a state of, call it security, where now you've got 30 days of food. Maybe you're doing a little bit of gardening now. You're growing some herbs and some salad greens or whatever. You've got beyond, say, just a simple generator system. You got maybe you got a generator tied into the grid of your house. That's just, you can get those Cummins engines that you can get them for like 10 grand, and they'll show up and wire them in for you. That as soon as the power goes out of your house, boom, 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 that thing fires up and immediately takes the load of everything you're needing. That's a fantastic. That's essentially what I have, but it's tied into my power system. So my power system is a bit more complicated. But imagine being in a state of security here. So you have something like that. Then you think about water. Okay, now instead of, less dependent would be to have, 7 to maybe 7 days of water. Now, a secure state, you got 30 days of water. Maybe you're doing a bit of rainwater catchment outside on the gutters of your roof. So at least for, say, 10 months of the year, if you're in a cold climate, you can have water from the roof. You just got to have the right kind of roof. You want to have steel, not shingles. But there's one example there. Then you get to a state of resilience where now you're doing all that stuff and more, and you're doing, okay, now I'm doing all the rainwater catchment. I got water storage. I dug a pond, and I got a pit well. You got a couple more sources of water and a couple more sources of storage that are decentralized, and some can also start to get into self-replication. That's what's so empowering about being on the land, is that now you can develop systems that self-replicate. And that's where the whole idea of biological capital comes into play, and it gets really exciting. But just thinking about this, we're going up the scale of dependency to less dependency, to security, now to resilience. So that's what a resilient water system might look like for a homestead. Then you can say, okay, what does resilient food system look like? It's everything we've discussed prior, stored food, whatnot. Now we're doing serious gardening. Now we're doing minimum 1/4 acre of garden. You're growing not only like all the fresh veggies you eat for at least the summer, but you're also starting to do some storage crops. Then maybe you got some layers, some chicken layers that you're getting eggs from. Then you think about electricity. Now what does electricity look like at a resilient standpoint? It's everything I've mentioned, up to a point where maybe you got a backup generator hooked up to the grid of your home. It's not a hard thing to wire in. Now you've got some solar on top of that. And maybe you're still grid tied, but you've got, maybe 5 kilowatts of solar coming in for the sunnier months. That gives you almost all the power you need. You're still drawing from the grid when you need it, but you also got a backup generator. Okay. So, and then as far as shelter during all of this, you've got things like alternative places to poop and pee, alternative ways to heat, a state of security when it comes to the shelter of your home would be to have the basic things completely off grid. So you can do wood heat, you can poop in buckets or have somewhere to do that if your septic isn't functioning or whatnot. And you've got, ways to heat that home and to stay dry. When you move into sovereignty, everything kicks up and becomes and starts to self-replicate in a way. And your context can change the whole way through this, right? This could be moving and just getting yourself into better positions as you go, because nothing in life is static. It's all dynamic, and it's all a journey. And so what I try to demonstrate with kind of talking about that is that don't get hung up on these limiting beliefs of, oh, look at Curtis on the mountain. Like, I can't do that. That's ridiculous. Forget that. I've been doing this shit for 15 years. Yeah, I'm on a mountain because I've worked my ass off for a long time and set myself up with the goal of doing this the entire time. Okay. Whereas most people, you might have been doing something else. I've been fortunate enough that I've stacked my career into the holistic decisions I make in my life. A lot of people can't do that. So don't compare yourself to me. Just compare yourself to who you were yesterday or where you were last year, because all of this is a journey. And who knows how relevant all of it will be. It's better to be prepared. It's better to have the stuff and not need it than to need it and not have it. And what I hope too is that along the way, you'll realize that you enjoy it. You'll be like, hey, I like growing my own food. I like raising animals. Hey, I like scraping the snow off my solar panels. Hey, all these things that I do are labor. And instead of going out and lending my labor out to the Rothschild family when I go and work to make dollars that they print and I pay back at interest, I keep that labor closer to home. It's just like women with suffrage in the civil rights. It was always all a scam just to get women out of the household so that they could be taxed. That's all it was. And look at where it's got us. Would you say the average family is better off with women's civil liberties like that? Think about it. Everybody's divorced. How many kids do you know that grew up with single parents? I grew up with a single parent. It was incredibly hard. It sucks. But it's the same idea, is that If you can now, instead of outsourcing everything you need in your life, you can start bringing it back to home, and you can stack the benefit of that labor in the zone 1 of the homestead with the family, and it benefits your health. So for example, yeah, I put a decent amount of work into my firewood each year, but it's exercise for me. It keeps me, it's one of the things that I do that keeps me the most fit, actually, is dealing with firewood, because you're carrying it. With that same task, I'm also educating my children on the value of hard work. And my kids are witnessing me do a task day in and day out that they associate with work. So most kids grow up with their parents' work being outsourced, as in daddy goes to work in the morning and I don't see him till 4 o'clock. So there's no holistic back to home association with the idea of work. Thus, people don't learn to work, right? So I stack in two things right there by just doing firewood. The other thing I stack in comes down to holistic health. Wood is the most organic and ecologically beneficial source of heat. Okay. Way more than any source of heat. And here's why. Number one, the source of heat itself. Firewood has infrared heat in it. There's something about standing around a fire. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. You stand around a fire at any time of the year, maybe not in the heat of summer because nobody does that, but when it's necessary, standing around a fire is hypnotic in a good way. It's meditative to the mind. It inspires creativity out of people. That goes back to the myths of standing around fire and listening to stories and the verbal word and the expression of the logos and the truth around a fire that is mythological and so connected to who we are. But also the radiant heat of wood is unbelievably healing to your body. Anybody who has a wood stove in their home knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's nothing like sitting in a chair or sitting around the fire and feeling that heat. There's no heat you can get from any other source. When you walk into a space that's heated by wood and you're like, ah, wow, the feeling of it cannot be replicated. The ecological benefit of wood is that I can, in my context of living on the land, is I can thin my forest for my entire life. I can thin that forest, get all the benefits of the work, but I can actually make my forest better by thinning it out, by cutting out the snags, by removing the deadfall, clearing up space so that other trees can get bigger, spacing the trees accordingly, 10 feet between each main leader. Doing that kind of thing reduces fire risk. It cycles the carbons that are on the soil. Like burning wood is a nothing burger. Like this whole thing of if everybody burned wood, well, everybody wouldn't burn wood. At least everybody will never have a wood stove. They'll never be needed. So to exercise that argument that leftists make about wood is ridiculous. But wood is absolutely incredible. And we all know putting carbon into the atmosphere is a nothing burger, right? Anybody who's relatively awake has figured out the climate change thing with carbon is a lie, that to this day, nobody has ever been able to prove that a change in 0.03 of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would make any significant difference. And they can't draw to any direct examples. All they can do is make models. It's BS. The only way that wood fire is not good for you environmentally is in really low air pressure. Like right now I have with snow coming down, my smoke comes out of my wood stove and it actually goes down. So you need to think about the way your homestead is laid out and where your wind directions are, because if you are downhill from that smoke, and my smoke coming out of the wood stove literally is falling downhill right now. If you're in direct, like if you have another building that's directly down there or something like that, you can smoke yourself out and it's not good for you. But other than that, wood is the best source of heat. Absolutely. And there's all kinds of other good things out there too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but it's amazing and it's totally holistic. And so that's getting back to the point I was making, is that the biggest FU to the New World Order and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Carnegies and all these cronies, Council on Foreign Relations, all these cronies, is to get on the land. And people are just going to sit there and say, oh, well, I can't do that and make up excuses. Okay, fine, make up your excuses. But it really is. It really is that if you want to bring it all back home and have complete agency over everything in your life, it really is the only way to completely own it, is to be on the land. And I think that that's what we're supposed to do. I believe that that's what God wants us to do, that we go to the mountains, we go back to the land. And I'm not proposing everybody becomes an agrarian. And realistically, in order to maintain the level of civilization, or at least some resemblance of civilization as we know it today, what will have to happen is there's going to be cities. There has to be, right? But they won't be New World Order smart cities. They're probably going to be villages of people, because you can't have a lot of people developing interesting things if they have to do agrarian work every day, right? Like that's the whole idea of civilization. Civilization was created after agriculture, because before agriculture, civilization could not exist. Without having an agriculture sector that can take care of the basic necessities for food for everybody so that they don't have to every day, allows specialization. And so that's important. It's important to understand. And so I'm not necessarily proposing that everybody go back to and even do exactly what I'm doing. But if you can't do exactly what I'm doing, you need to get close to people who are. You need to start thinking about community and being in places with people that can also provide things that you need, and you can hopefully provide something that they need, because this is where our economies have the black swan of our economies is the over specialization and the disconnection to the average individual through needs and benefits. That is the crux. And even Nassim Taleb kind of touches on that in his stuff, Anti-Fragile and the Black Swan and stuff, is that if you don't have any connection to that thing, that resource or whatever it is that you need, you just go to a place that's outside of your control and you hope that it's there. That's a risk factor in your life. And so it's not necessarily that you have to completely have 100% control agency over that, but merely diversifying the source of it and bringing it a little closer to home. And so this is where you get to the idea of the 100-mile diet and stuff like that, which is all really good ideas, where okay, if I'm not going to grow my own food, I should absolutely be supporting small farmers in my area for everything that I can't produce. At least that I cannot get locally. Okay, you might not be able to find a local bottle of ketchup. Okay, you got to get that stuff at the grocery store. We do, but you can get all the meat you need. Absolutely, most people now. I mean, some parts of the Rust Belt, or not the Rust Belt, but some parts of big ag country, you can't, because it's all just commercial commodified ag. But most today, you can buy local food. You can buy local meat, local dairy, local vegetables, local fruits. You can buy all of those sort of live, unprocessed foods from 100% local. You can do that today. That's not hard to do. So that there alone would be a significant step towards less dependency, or potentially even security, because security might look like for you in terms of food, not necessarily being a hardcore gardener like I am, but it could be a hardcore supporter of farms. And man, those people are the backbone of your customer base if you're a market gardener. They were for me my whole career. Absolutely. There was always 10 to 30 people that spent, it's a Pareto principle thing, that they spent the lion's share of income that comes from your farm, whether it be restaurants, customers in some way or another, right? That distribution is always spread out that way. And so be that individual, be the guy who's buying, who knows all the farmers, and that's a good guy to be. You'll also find that you love those people. You'll love hanging out with farmers. I find pretty much farmers in all spaces are the nicest people that you'll meet. Even just industrial ag farmers that have just drive a tractor day in and day out, they're some of the nicest people you'll meet. And because they're connected to a process. Even, I'm no fan of industrial agriculture, but at the same time, I have no hate on for farmers that do it. because they're just in a way victims of our compartmentalized, commodified, commercialized economy. And there's not much they can do about it. I'm sure most farmers would rather be doing niche market organic farming. It's way more fun. It's way more sexy. It's way more profitable, but it's not necessarily just easy to walk into, especially if you grew up in a particular sector of that industry that you know very well, but you just don't know a lot of it outside of that. And that's totally forgivable. But, you know, again, going back to, you know, your food, is that just being that guy who's connected to that is huge, is huge. I'll tell you what, if I was farming again and I had those 10 customers and times got tough, guaranteed they would be the first to be served in the lineup of people asking for food, right? I mean, that's just that's common sense. Of course, you're first going to help the people that help you the most, right? That's just what anybody would do. But that again, thinking about it in this way, thinking about it in this scale, what are the steps you can do from a state of dependency to a state of sovereignty? And who knows what that looks like beyond? I'm certainly not there. But thinking about it in a non-linear way, because now it becomes more empowering. Instead of just getting pissed off that a guy like Curtis is on the mountain doing this, you can just go, okay, well, what's step one for our family? What does that look like? Okay, food, what can we do for step one? Energy, what can we do? Shelter, what can we do? Water, what can we do? Right? What's step one for us to get us to a point where we feel that we're less dependent? Okay. Then what's step three? What's the next one? So let's get to a point of security where we can now withstand 30 days of turmoil. Let's get to a point of resilience. Now there's some element of self-replication in the systems. There's some element of holistic context in that those systems and things that you're doing are now stacking benefits into your life, bringing home the economy, right? Bringing home the economy of your time and energy. Because if you just work a job to pay for the heat for your home, pay for your food and all those things, you're outsourced. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but just for the context of understanding what I'm saying here, is that when you outsource the economy, it gets taxed and inflated and regulated. And so the more you can bring it back home, the less you're buying another private island for Jeffrey Epstein. Because essentially, if all of us participating in the economy with dollars, that's essentially what we're doing. That's essentially what you're doing. That's why Bitcoin is potentially a sweet solution. That's why precious metals, holding them physically, is a good solution. There's all kinds of tools in the toolkit, but the dollar hegemony, any of them, any central bank dollar that comes from a central bank, you're supporting the hegemony. And so that's, until we change that, nothing's really going to change, but you can change it at home first. And that's what I'm saying here. You can bring all that economy back home. Get your wife back home. She probably wants to be back home anyways. Does she want to be out hustling with kids at home, or they're in daycare and the daycare sucks and you know there's somebody woke there that you don't want to be on the same shift when your kid's at the daycare? Like, do you want to be thinking about that? Wouldn't you rather just be home? I mean, even if you pay taxes, you pay less taxes per capita when you have two parents at home, because you'll be in a lower tax bracket. And so it's actually, it's so much more efficient, especially if your family is on the same page. Like, it is so much more efficient for my wife and children to do it the way we do, where I make the money, and she has some ways of making money too if she wants to. But it's so much more efficient if I'm working, making the money, and she's at home, and the home is centered around the mother. And I kind of think about our home, and especially as I design our new home and build it, thinking about that hearth of the house, the center of the house, the heart of the house. The mother is the heart of the house, but in the off-grid scenario as well. So the mother's the heart of the house, and where is the mother? The mother's in the kitchen. Okay. We're going trad here, right? So the social justice warriors are leaving now, if there's any of them left. But in the trad house, the mother's the heart of the house. The mother is in the heart of the house, which is the kitchen. And that's where the wood stove is the best. I'm kind of going on a total side tangent here, but I just get so excited about these things. Is that the wood cook stove? There's all kinds of wicked brands out there. One that I'm really into right now is called J.A. Roby. It's a stove made in Quebec, Canada. My buddy Ben Falk uses them, and you can heat your home with one source, like set up to 1,800 square feet with one source. You cook on it. You can plumb water through this for all your domestic hot water. So imagine the heart of the home in the most off-grid situation is the mom in the kitchen with the wood stove that everybody wants to be around. Like how cool would that be? And that's what I want to do in our house. And that's what my buddy Ben, that's how he's got his setup in his kitchen, is that it's all there. And how holistic is that? Again, going back to what I was talking about, is that the more you start to bring the stuff home, that's why it's homesteading, is you're bringing all this stuff and you're working on it, and you're, instead of just going to a job and then paying for that thing later, is that you're bringing all that home. And so that's the homestead. And the more you do it, the less you're working for the bankers. Because again, going back to my principal thesis in this, starting with the Tesla thing and how dependent people are, is that there's no more important issue politically than addressing the corporate commodification of human beings through the industrialized state capitalist system, which is coming out of the Holy Roman Empire and the Anglo-American establishment through the city of London. That whole racket, central banking, everything in there, until that's addressed, nothing politically meaningful is going to change, because why would it? Because it's working really well for them. So why would they change anything meaningful? So if you can't change that, change this. Change the homestead, bring it home. Stop outsourcing everything you're doing. Stop only working for dollars. Start working for other things. Bringing the work home, bringing the electricity home, bringing the heat home, bring it all home. And it's all a journey, right? There's many steps on the journey, but you got to start somewhere. And that's what I hope I gave some of you guys earlier when I talked about the food, water, energy, shelter, 7 days of all those things. And then shelter being poop and pee for 7 days, and heat. And if you can have 7 days of that, that's a major step for a lot of people. And I would say, really, folks, 2024 is going to get lit. And the gaslighting is all there. And this Tesla thing is just gaslighting you. But nobody's seen it. It's funny because the right wing, here's another thing, and sort of meta thing I wanted to riff on a little bit, is that the right wing right now, and in a mainstream way, I would consider myself right wing. Like a leftist would call me right wing, though I wouldn't really call myself that. I'm just, instead of thinking about left and right wing, it's about less government or more government. That's what it is. So I'm a less government guy. Principally, fundamentally, I'm an anarchist philosophically, and I believe that I don't need the state. I'm more of an agorist, that I believe that I can live without the state. But I also do believe that most people need the state. And so I'm not opposed to the state. I think the state should exist for people who want it, and that's most people, and that's fine. But I'm not in that. And I would like to live my life in a way, ideally, that I don't need the state. And the state can be there for people who need it, and I could just exit. That's what I want. That's what I'm trying to do in the most sort of physical sense up here. But that, if we bring all this stuff home, then we can live less without the state. And that's kind of where the idea of being an agorist is how do I live my life and set myself up to live with the least amount of intervention with the state? And that's where, all those things, food, water, energy, shelter, all that stuff comes from. But yeah, folks, that's what I wanted to say. Oh, hey, let's bring in a caller. But we won't do this too much longer. I'll do a little bit. I'll read a couple more super chats, and then we'll do maybe a caller or two. I see Spruce Heel. I see Pierre in the house too. Yeah, what do we got? Brother Spruce Heel. What's he got to say here? There you go, brother. There you go. Hallelujah. Amen. Yes, sir. What's on your mind, brother? Or is that all you wanted to say?
That's really all.
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate it, brother. Yeah, it's funny. All this started with Teslas, but I like to again pull the meta narrative. Okay, wait, I wanted to finish my thought on the meta narrative. I didn't finish that. I got side railed again. Is that right now, and I'll bring in we got Andy here. I'll bring him in a minute. Right now, the right wing is getting too comfortable. So I went on the tangent and I started talking about whether I'm right wing or not. It didn't really matter. I'm more of just a small government guy in general. But people in our umbrella, call it greater umbrella, we vary in opinions and shapes and sizes and all that. But a lot of people are getting comfortable right now because X as a platform has really allowed the magnification of people on the freedom side of their voice. Yes, it's not perfect. Yes, there's some people still that are silenced. You can't share banned.video links, whatever. Alex Jones is back on. It's important what's happening. And then Trump's for sure going to get reelected, in my opinion, absolutely unequivocally. And so people are getting comfortable again, just like we were in the run up to 2016. Don't get comfortable. Getting comfortable now is going to be a trap. And so, enjoy it. Enjoy the freedom that we have right now. Enjoy the memes, enjoy that stuff. But don't get comfortable and keep moving the needle forward because it's going to throttle again. And I think it's going to throttle worse under Trump. I'll make this call right now. And I hope I'm wrong on this because if I'm wrong, I'll admit that I'm wrong. I'm not staking like $10 million in Bitcoin here. But I will make the bet that Trump will get reelected and then people will be excited for a while, but the New World Order is going to hammer on harder than you ever thought. And probably just like how Trump was the only way warp speed happened, in my opinion, is that the pandemic would have never happened the way it did if it was Hillary Clinton, that something else will happen during Trump that they would have never been able to pull it off under Biden because the right wing would have resisted it too much. So don't get comfortable because I think that's what's going to happen. And we'll see. We'll see. Let's bring in Andy Max Rodriguez. How you doing, brother? Hit that mic on the bottom left, unless you're calling in from a computer.
Okay.
There he
can you
is.
hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. I was caught a little off guard there because I guess there was some lag on my part, but thanks for having me on for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, just big fan of your stuff since I was in New York City, kind of doing urban gardening myself.
No way.
Yeah. I started off with your book, The Urban Farmer, and also Fukuoka, One Straw Revolution.
Yes.
Kind of other books, Ben Falk's book, Resilient Homestead.
Nice.
Yeah, all that was super inspiring to me when I was living in Queens.
Nice.
Yeah.
Got out of Queens, I suspect.
Oh yes, I'm talking to you, looking at a hoop house in a nice rural area in Virginia now. So it's been cool to follow your kind of parallel growth as well, because I kind of came to the same conclusion that the cities weren't the place to be, and found kind of a little piece of paradise out in the rural area.
Wow.
So that's for all you've been doing, but I kind of caught the tail half of this stream here, but I know you were discussing like ways for people to like integrate slowly into I guess not the parallel economy, but like the alternative energy exchange of not just money, but bringing stuff home.
Yeah.
You don't need to buy food, bypassing the taxed dollar by just going directly to the resource, to the thing you need. And I guess I just wanted to share an idea for some people that might still be looking for ways to make that transition, because it's kind of tough at first. I imagine, especially now, because just things are expensive. It's expensive to move. It's expensive to, seeds cost more, soil costs more. I mean, I spent about 7 or 8 years just doing all kinds of crazy experiments in farming, and good farms, bad farms, and looking at all sorts of stuff before I ended up where I am today. But my suggestion is to try to maybe see if you can get work as like a caretaker or a groundskeeper, or I call them gentleman farms. They're
Yes.
kind of like
Yes.
yeah, large capital. They got a lot of money to throw around. They're not necessarily focused on production, but since the kind of narrative to be more sustainable is like, it's been popular and it's still popular, and people are finally starting to take notice, that it's a good idea to grow your own food. So my job is to basically farm for somebody who's, really well off and has a big private estate. So they pay me in dollars to generate food, invest in infrastructure, greenhouses, all that stuff. I lease some land from them to raise some cattle. Yeah. So it's like, it allows you to kind of use somebody else's funds to experiment, because I mean, I'm sure you share the sentiment that if you've got to learn how to farm, if you didn't grow up in an agricultural environment, you're gonna need like some time to experiment, figure out like what you're good at, how to do things, how to grow stuff, how to do earthworks, all that.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can learn that stuff, and this comes down to getting paid to learn, right? Or kind of working to learn, not working to earn, focusing on the non-financial aspect of the work, and that's again another homesteading idea, is bringing that home, in that the investment in sort of my human capital or intellectual capital is more valuable than financial capital.
Yeah. Yeah. And double-edged, double bonus if it's a resource kind of capital as well. Like, let's say a project we're doing now is they're funding, they're giving me money to figure out how to grow mushrooms, which is something I haven't really messed with. So I kind of got to teach myself a little bit, but that's still hours being paid to learn, like you say. And then, there's going to be an excess of production of mushrooms. So we take those home. I get a little bit of, I get cash, I get knowledge, and I get, the actual product itself. So if you can stack functions with your job, there's a lot of work in these rural areas for people to attempt to farm. I think a lot of people that are well-to-do are starting to see like the writing on the wall, and they're in their 60s or whatever, and they're not going to be out there tilling the garden or building a hoop house or whatever. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to help them prep while also learning yourself.
100%, brother. Yeah.
It's a lot easier in my experience to do that than to try to do it on your own dime.
It is.
Because
producing
all types of food. I mean, beef, chicken, veggies, all that, fruits, all these are art forms that require a really long period of experimentation and learning. So
they do. Yeah, brother. I appreciate you.
Don't be afraid to look out in the rural areas for some of those caretaker jobs.
Absolutely, brother.
Farm manager jobs.
Hey, man, appreciate you bringing that in, Andy. I'm just gonna let somebody else in too. I am. I'm just gonna. Oops. That's me. I was talking and I muted it. Hey, man, I appreciate you bringing that in. That's super valuable, and I totally agree.
Cool, man. Yeah. And I just real quick question for you on this energy, talking about Teslas. What is your opinion on diesel vehicles, particularly like kind of older ones in terms of sustainability because,
Yes,
well, I've got my own opinions, but what do you think about those?
I do.
those old diesels?
I think there's something there. It's not on my top list right now, but yeah, having an old truck, an old thing that's very easy to fix. Absolutely. Once I finish my shop, I'm going to look at that. I run out of places to put things up here, but yeah, man, no, I think there's something there for sure.
Absolutely, brother. Well, yeah, if you do get the shop cleared out, those pre-emissions, pre-2000s era Cummins and Mercedes, they can run on a variety of waste products. I run my station wagon off of like used motor oil and shit.
Yes.
So it's yeah, so
Exactly.
it's possible. Yep. So it's kind of a similar loop to what you got with the Tesla and the sun and the energy. So
Exactly. It's another element, right? Diversification is the key.
yes, sir.
Right on, brother. Well, I'm gonna bring somebody else in here. Appreciate you calling in. Take care. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, you know what Andy was saying there is I've talked about that a lot, and it's always worth iterating. It's always cool to hear other people's take on that. But I've said that for a long time that if you want to get rural, don't just, again, it's people fall into this false dichotomy of thinking, which is these limiting beliefs of, oh, unless I'm doing it as hardcore as this, there's no point of trying. I might as well just sit here and complain and talk shit about everybody else who tries. And so you can just move to a rural area. And as Andy was saying in there, they are begging for good people. You could get a job working as a mechanic now without any experience. You just show up and they'll hire you and teach you. You can do that. You could work at a sawmill. You can work as a heavy equipment operator. You can do so many things right now because there's such a demand for that kind of work. Getting into trades has never been easier or better. And as Andy was talking about too, learning how to farm from somebody else is a great way to learn, because then you learn not on your dime and you actually make some money at the same time. So there's nothing wrong with that. So I want to bring in here, behold a broken chair. And then we might just take one more and then just shut the space down. I still got chores to do outside. Hey, hit that microphone on the bottom left of your screen. Unless you're calling from a computer, then it might not work.
No, can you hear me?
There we go. How you doing?
It's just a couple of things that you kind of sparked off in my mind when you were talking about renewable energy resources. And, there's quite a few places in the States where you can look at the county rolls and find unpaid taxes on a property to try to suss out what's available. So you can get, property before it lists, before it gets snatched up by speculators. And in this area, which is central West Virginia, quite a few of them have natural gas wells on the property. And that is in the
Wow.
You can use that.
Wow.
So you don't have to pay for gas, and you run your generator off of that. And you could, like here, the soil is, I don't know if you've been to the Ozarks, you've probably been to the Ozarks,
Oh, yeah.
southern Missouri. Okay, so they have like this really clay soil that's doesn't have a lot of organics in it. It tends to run off, all the nutrients end up in the Mississippi Delta.
Yep.
They also have rock in there too. And out here we don't have that rock, but it is that same kind of clay. But it's great for making bricks. So I mean, if you wanted to fire a kiln or something.
I know. Have you ever heard about those open source ecology guys that make all that open source hardware? And they've got that brick maker where they can make rammed earth bricks out of that kind of soil.
Where are they at?
They're somewhere in the States. I forget where they're called. Open source ecology. Check them out. They have these, they're called 20 machines to power a small civilization. And they open source everything, and anybody can build it if you have the materials. Super cool stuff. But it's kind of going on what you're talking about there.
Okay. It's the owner of the property, and like what the guy was talking about, another point, but the owner of the property, this was a farm with no infrastructure on it, and it wasn't really being used for the last 20 years. It wasn't even being grazed, really. Fodder's kind of a poor quality, and it was happening. I didn't know the guys, so an opportunity. But before then, I just went on helpx.net, paid the $20 and found a host I was comfortable with. And I helped him for part of the year and learned, how to take care of chickens and stuff. And, kind of got some skills back under maybe that I'd forgotten or I hadn't learned or whatever. And so that was another opportunity to, I brought my own motorhome, so you didn't really have any housing costs, but a lot of these hosts will have room and board included too. So, especially if you're one of these young guys that doesn't feel like you have any practical skills and you don't know how you'll get out into the country, or if you're a couple, you don't know how you get in the country, they're looking like these older folks, and younger ones too, are already established homesteaders and looking for more labor, because that's a primary input, of course, in rural areas.
Yeah, brother, 100%. And that's why there's just the opportunities are here. And people keep making up excuses as to reasons to not leave the city, but there are a lot of reasons to leave the city. Actually, there's a lot of reasons we all know of that are in the city, but there's a lot of reasons that are good incentives and opportunities outside of the city to pursue exactly what you're talking about. And it's so true, man. I find it in every place that I go to. It's the same thing in the small areas, is they're dying to show young people the trades that aren't going to be around much longer.
Yeah, they have time, they have land, they're well established, they got all their needs taken care of. And they wouldn't mind sharing that with people that are good help. You can find lemon hosts too, and there's lemon helpers. But if you're really sincere and earnest and want to learn, you can hook up with some hosts that are really helpful. There's opportunities out there. You don't have to be miserable in your mom's basement.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Exactly. I love it, man. It's empowering. It's an empowering message, brother. And thanks for coming in, man. I'm gonna bring in my good brother from Quebec here, Pierre, in. Hey, Pierre.
How's it going?
Good, brother. How are you?
Not bad. By the way, points, all very good points from your guest speakers from A to Z. And but I agree with you. 2024, it's gonna be a crazy ride. So
buckle up.
We say, attache ta ceinture avec la broche. So it's tie your waist with some wire, whatever. It's hard to translate.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a whole bunch of things I want to say, but I know you want to get back
No.
work. But
yeah, riff on it for a while, Pierre.
Well, back to the energy thing. Because a lot of these discussions are like stream of consciousness. So that goes with all kinds of things that go on in your mind when you're listening to people, including yourself. And it's, you have to wonder, like, what's the end game with the huge hydrocarbon producers? It's not as if like one day they're like multinational trillions of dollars companies, and you look around, there's still plastics being produced. Pharmaceuticals rely on oil, etc. It's just, what is the end game here? Because that's just not going to go down overnight. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And
yeah, no, I totally see what you mean. It's
it ties into this whole electric vehicle. Well, for sure. That it occupies such a small percentage of transportation and locomotion, if you will. How do you get from point A to point B? I mean, although Tesla's, as Elon Musk claims, have made were one of the models was the number one seller last year in the world. I don't know. I just don't see enough of them in my neighborhood or on the highway. So I don't know. And anyway, I'm just throwing that out there. It's like stream of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, I think Pierre, I mean, you don't see a lot of them in Quebec in general, just because, as displayed with the people living in Chicago, they don't do well for urban people in cold cities. because it's just not practical at all. If you don't have a warm place to park it overnight, it's going to lose 1% charge per night, pretty much, or more, 1 to 5% per night. And then if you don't have your own place to charge it, then you're dependent and waiting at charging stations, which is totally inconvenient. But if you go down to Southern California, it's insane how many Teslas are. I mean, there's even parts of the US that aren't even like California. There's parts of Tennessee where I've seen tons of Teslas on the road. There's a lot of places where there's a lot of Teslas. You don't see them in Quebec because they're just not practical for the average person in Quebec.
And I would, that's a very good point. Actually, it's good for a big state like California to have Teslas, because we all know there are similarities as far as socialism / communism with Quebec, but in California, it's expensive. It's, the price of gas there is super taxed like it is in Quebec and the rest of Canada. So it makes sense in a large, megalopolis area and state like California. It does make sense for China, so huge consumers of energy. It does make sense. I would say a big problem in Quebec is just everything in Quebec is more expensive.
Pretty much.
And we get all these things. A Netflix offer or a Spotify offer does not apply to Quebec because companies don't want to deal with Quebec.
Because it's a pain in the ass. And the language police there, it's a pain in the ass. Of course, that's why there was, what did they call it in French with the white flight or the English flight from the 80s when everybody left? What did they call that in French? Remember that? When all the English businesses left?
Well, in English, we call it the exodus,
Yeah. But I thought there was some kind of French slang term for it that described that.
Probably is. It's not coming to mind right
now. Oh, okay.
But,
anyways, yeah.
That was the beginning of the end. That's what made Toronto.
For sure.
From Montreal and all the businesses, everything. I can tell you something. In the 1980s, I was in my 20s. The worst time to be a young man or young person in Quebec. I mean, the jobs were scarce. It was terrible.
Yeah.
It was all service industry jobs. And
yes.
Because everything moved.
Yep.
You're in no more manufacturing in Montreal, nothing. And, and it's just been shit ever since,
Yeah. And that's why the rent was always cheap. Like back when I lived in Montreal, I never paid more than $500 for rent. And I had really nice places. But hey, Pierre, I've got to run actually, and I have to end this stream right away. But man, appreciate your call, and always good to go down memory lane with Montreal with you.
Okay, take it easy and have a great weekend.
All right, brother.
Ciao.
And folks, I am going to wrap this one up. I've got something I have to do at 2:00, and this has been a lot of fun. This went a little longer than I thought, but that's okay. And I hope that you guys got some value out of it. If you did, smash the like, share it. That goes on X and YouTube. And support freedomfarmers.com if you want to learn any of the stuff that I talk about in detail. Growing food, living on the land, finding land. freedomfarmers.com is the place to do that. You can sign up for a month at 50% if you use the code New Year 2024, all one word. And you can just try it out. You can check out our Homestead Accelerator program, which is helping people get on the land real quick. We're publishing so many good places. This week had some crazy properties in Michigan, Oklahoma, some really, really nice stuff in Kentucky. And if you want to get on the land, there's lots of opportunities out there. All right, folks. Thanks for joining me here. We'll see you in the next one.